David Daley got the cover story at the New Republic with this very visceral image. It's a very important story. MAGA's state-by-state plot to butcher democracy. This is the cover story at the New Republic. I've got one of the best journalists covering this issue, the best journalist covering this issue, which is really an issue of our democracy and how to save it. David Daley live with me here on a winter, it's not winter, December 2nd, but it feels like winter, from Massachusetts. Thank you for joining me. You're from Massachusetts, I believe. You're there.
I am. Hello from snowy Massachusetts.
Lots to talk about in terms of this article. It's so important what you're writing about here. And I'm going to get to it in a minute, but I just got to get your take because you're a real smart guy. You have done and seen it all and covered it all in a number of different media outlets. You've authored books about democracy and so on. So I just want to get your general take on the state of things before, obviously, we get to elections and gerrymandering and redistricting. The state of our politics, given the midterm elections, given the Mamdani win in New York, what that means for Democrats, and then the fact that he sat down with our commander in chief, who looked at him like the proudest son he'd never had. What are your thoughts on kind of where we're at today, David?
It's a wild moment, isn't it? I think what we are watching in real time is Donald Trump becoming perhaps the most unpopular president in American history. His population popularity numbers are cratering. They're down into the mid 30s right now. This is really uncharted territory. His coalition on the Hill, if you look closely, there's signs that it might be cracking a bit. You know, there is talk about investigating his Secretary of Defense for war crimes with these boats in the Caribbean. And it's not just Democrats saying this, right? It's a number of Republicans in the House and the Senate are deeply concerned about who gave these orders to kill these unarmed, folks on boats that, according to the federal government are, dangerous narco terrorists, when they're actually letting the actual narco terrorists, like the former president of Honduras, walk out of jail today with a Donald Trump pardon. I think as Americans see the affordability crisis, but then they also see a massive grand ballroom being built on the grounds of the White House that just seems to get bigger and bigger and bigger. I think we've all waited for years for the moment when the reality of this guy's grift was going to break through to the American people. And maybe it's finally happening. The grift, the dangerous ineptitude and incompetence as we watch what Bobby Kennedy is doing, and childhood diseases that had been eradicated slowly beginning to rear their head in red states that have walked back vaccine mandates. I think Americans are getting a glimpse at what Donald Trump and his band of crooks and cronies and grifters has in mind. And I think perhaps it's not what they had in mind.
There seem to be cracks, and you're seeing a whole bunch of Republicans now retiring, resigning, most high profile of which is Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is a fire-breathing right-wing conspiracy theorist, white nationalist, and Trump sycophant. And if it's Epstein files or overall unpopularity, whatever it is, you're seeing Republicans, elected Republicans, either say, I'm out of here, or like, remember when Lindsey Graham did for 15 minutes on January 6th? He's like, I'm out of here, I'm back. But they're turning away from him, maybe investigating him, realizing they got to cut their losses with this guy for their next election, for their political future, or maybe, God forbid, for their own conscience. And if the Republicans in Congress turn against him, criticize him, investigate his Secretary of Defense, that's a huge sea change. And before the midterm elections that we may or may not have free or fair.
He's not going to be on the ballot in 2028, and I think a growing number of Republicans are realizing this, and they are realizing they're going to be on their own. And this is the first time, 2016, 2020, 2024, Trump has held this party in his hand for what will be essentially a dozen years come the next presidential election. And folks are getting ready for what that is going to look like. Now, I don't think we ought to be under any illusion that Trumpism is going to disappear. And certainly Republicans are going to continue to have a supermajority in the U.S. Supreme Court. They're going to continue to have big structural advantages in terms of holding on to the House and also the Senate. They're going to have big structural advantages in the Electoral College. Let's not blind ourselves to the reality here. But the movement that has elected Trump twice now is in danger of cracking up as those who would be its standard bearers, those who would be its leaders, or those who have simply waited in the wings for this moment begin to ponder what their next step is going to be.
I mean, it's exactly right. It would seem exactly right. That's what we're seeing happening. And if he's a lame duck, what does that mean? Also, it's worth mentioning just how bad they are at governing. We knew that. Republicans are always bad at governing. They're great at selling stuff. No one's better salesman than Trump. He's a grifter. He's by the way, the Trump phones that they made. Did you hear the latest reporting? Like, there's an NBC reporter and plenty of others bought those phones and followed up, and they said they'll be here soon. They ordered them in August, and their phone's still not here. It's certainly not manufactured in America like they said it was. The point being, what you're saying, the grift is in. Like, it's starting to be seen by more and more people. Because they're not good at governing, they keep failing at big, high-profile things, including the targeted prosecutions of his enemies, Comey and Letitia James and others. And, you know, Alina Habba yesterday, Lindsey Halligan, they got thrown. They weren't put in the jobs legally the right way. Judges, including Trump judges, I think, were like, how are you even in this job? You don't even have, you got to go through certain steps. Those high profile failures, what do they mean for this administration? Because I'm glad they're not good at governing. I'm glad that they are putting inept, unqualified people in these important positions to carry out his insane orders.
Their incompetence is showing. And the incompetence is dangerous sometimes when it comes to RFK and vaccines or Hegseth at the Department of Defense. But, you know, sometimes their incompetence has been a saving grace. And he has been so determined to prosecute these enemies. He wants them to experience a taste of what he felt over the years where there were multiple prosecutions into his conduct, whether it was his finances or whether it was January 6th. He has held these grudges. He's nurtured them. He has set forth to try to find prosecutors who would do his bidding. And when he finally found them, and that took a while because these cases are such an embarrassment, it's such a shame on the Department of Justice that would bring them. But the people that he found, have been, arrived out of a clown car. And even Trump judges can see this and won't tolerate it. So there are some positive moments to be found here. Maybe positive is a word too far, but I mean, I think there's reason for hope that the worst authoritarian instincts that it appeared no institutions would step up and block may be weakening. I think he still had great success in cowing big institutional media, in cowing big universities, in bending the knee of big law. But perhaps there are boundaries that will still hold. And maybe he will simply run out of not only competence, but also time.
having a minor internet issue that I think is clapping day people watching live.
I can hear you.
The great David Daley. See, he's got it. You can hear me. You're breaking up for me. I don't know. I'm gonna fix it. I fix it. Stand for fixing. I think I might be back. I'm dead. I died. Light.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. But you're not moving. Your picture's not moving. Now I see you. Is that working?
Almost. I'll be back. I don't know. About this guy.
Better?
I wonder if you can hear me on this one.
I can hear you. I can hear you.
How about over here? How about over here?
I can hear you. I can hear you.
Hmm. Can you hear me on this computer?
Yes.
But there's an echo. Testing. How about that? Now, all right. Let's try this. I think this should work for a minute until I figure out what the hell's going on here.
Okay.
Damn producer. But as long as you're talking more, because my audio is going to not be as good for a minute. But let's get to, as soon as I had that technical issue, let's get to your article, which is the cover story for the New Republic. Everybody's got to read this article. But set it up. This is a years-long strategy and effort by Republicans to redistrict, to have partisan gerrymandering, and you've been covering it from the start. This article kind of is a very comprehensive look at much of it, including some great solutions that have been offered by congressional representatives over the years. But take us through kind of where this started with the Republican leadership group, I guess, and Leonard Leo group.
Sure. And I'm echoing a little bit, it sounds like. But what we're watching this summer is an unprecedented midterm. We are watching as Republicans in Texas and North Carolina and Missouri and now Florida and Indiana, many other states are looking at redrawing their congressional maps to give themselves big advantages ahead of the midterm. Democrats have been countering this where they can. Proposition 50 in California is going to essentially allow Democrats to retaliate and gain back the 5 seats that Republicans in Texas have nabbed. And all of this matters so much because control of the House essentially rests on 3 seats. So we are seeing this big skirmishing, this big fighting in the middle of the decade, but that's usually not how it works. Usually we only redistrict once a decade. We redistrict after the census. And I've been chronicling how Republicans for the last 15 years have really understood that there is great power in the ability to control how you draw these district lines. Republicans first really understood this after the 2010 election. And that's what I talk about in Red Eft, but which I also go into in this New Republic piece. which is that after the election of Barack Obama in 2008 and the big Democratic wave that it ushered in, right? A Democratic supermajority in the US Senate, as hard to believe those numbers may be now, big Democratic gains nationwide. Republicans understood that as historic as that election was, the 2010 election could be much more consequential. It was a redistricting year, a census year, and all of the lines across the country would be redrawn for state legislatures and for Congress. So Republicans set about essentially understanding how power is won in this country and how the level below sometimes makes the rules for the level above. State legislatures tend to draw the maps for congressional districts. So Republicans set about winning state legislative races in Wisconsin, Ohio, Michigan, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Florida, Georgia, Texas, Alabama, Indiana, states that Democrats had, sometimes been able to win chambers in. And by winning about 110 state legislative races in those states in 2010, Republicans had the power to control, to dominate redistricting, to give themselves huge advantages in the fight for the U.S. House. And they have kept that advantage now for 15 years. And it's only been enhanced by rulings at this U.S. Supreme Court that have blessed and allowed this and made it that much more difficult for voters to do anything about it. So if you think you're living in a nation in which it is really, really difficult to kick your member of Congress out of office or hold them accountable, you are absolutely right. They draw the lines, they control the process. And I can't hear you.
Well explained. I think I fixed our technical issue. I think I'm back, right? You got me?
I babbled long enough for you to fix the technical issue.
You did it though. I mean, it's a very important and one of the most important stories to understand. You've covered the whole history and talked a little bit about the roots of it. But Republicans played the long game. They invested locally while Democrats got caught flat-footed. And part of it, though, is just a simple audacity in my mind, a lack of shame, because this is what's always hobbled Democrats, a certain kind of integrity. Or I think you got this quote in there about wanting to do the right thing versus necessarily the thing that's going to gain power. Republicans are about gaining power no matter what, without shame, lawlessly, one could argue, in any number of ways. And as a result, they've been able to take over so many different districts, rewrite those districts, pack courts, and make democracy a lot harder to achieve. And you compare it to, and others do, our democracy it is oftentimes in name only. Yes, you feel like you're going to vote, but you're really not represented. You really don't have a chance if you are an urban Republican or a rural Democrat, as you talk about. Tell me a little bit more about how it's a thinly veiled democracy, even before all of these latest redistricting efforts.
Back in 2024, there were 37 districts across the country out of 435 that were within 5 percentage points and basically then competitive. And so that is, a democracy in name only right there, when, less than 10% of the districts in this nation are competitive. I've never voted in a meaningful congressional race, living in New York and Massachusetts and Connecticut. Even when I lived in Kentucky for a period of time, I lived in the one bright blue district in Kentucky in Louisville. So, it is, we do not have much say. We are allowed to vote, but we are not allowed to vote in elections that generally mean much of anything, where that vote matters. And so much of that is because of way lines have been drawn to ensure that one side or the other wins that seat. And that pushes all of the energy into partisan primaries, which tend to be low turnout affairs. If 7 or 8 people are running in that race because they know that that's the key election to win, you can sometimes win a congressional primary in a non-competitive district with 17, 18% of the vote. and then you cruise into office. And that is how we get extremists representing districts that they don't actually match up with, but who can't actually be defeated. And they go to Washington and they behave like, crazed bomb throwers, as if they have an actual agenda and mandate, but they have neither. And yet, voters can't do much about it. So the time has really come. And I hope that this mid-decade gerrymandering apocalypse, wakes us up to the need for big structural reform. And I think a more proportional House, I try to talk about this a bit in the New Republic piece, as we think about solutions, a more proportional House. And we get that with multi-member districts, larger multi-member districts that we elect members with ranked choice voting. So, here in Massachusetts, where we have 9 single-member districts right now, and how you draw those lines makes all the difference. You would have 3 districts of 3, and you would vote with a proportional form of RCV, and you would probably get, 6 Democrats statewide, 2 Republicans, maybe 1 independent. If you did this in Tennessee, you'd probably get the opposite. But suddenly you would have Republicans from Massachusetts, you'd have Democrats from Texas. And if you did this in every state, right? If you did this in North Carolina and Missouri, what they're doing right now with mid-decade redistricting wouldn't work. It wouldn't be effective. They could not do it. You would actually have fair, proportional, representative maps from every single state in the nation. I mean, imagine that. All we have to do is pass a law, but we have to start talking about it, and we have to start building the awareness that there is a really easy, simple fix here that could bring a swing district to everybody. And that's the kind of change we so desperately need.
It's really easy, simple fix, except for the politics aren't there for it to be fixed. You talk about this really well, you spell it out at the end of this very important piece that everybody should read that David Daley just wrote, and it's posted for the New Republic. But you talk about how the legislation has been proposed and keeps being proposed. I think Jamie Raskin and another Democratic congressman, they keep proposing what you just said. It's not like it's a David Daley idea. It's a lot of people's idea. It's an idea that would create a far more representative democracy, and that arguably all voters would be more represented. So you could argue that it's in their self-interest. It's in everybody's self-interest. You could make this argument to conservatives. I was thinking about this when I was reading the article, and they would buy it to a huge extent, I think, until they realized that it means they probably wouldn't win as much. Because of the way that elections and campaigns are run and politics are run and gerrymandering, like they can run on these extreme ideas that a very small amount of people hold. And we know this through polling. We know this is true on any number of issues, from guns to the environment to, with regulating the financial institutions. A lot of people across the board want the same things, but Republicans keep getting elected and keep passing insane things that are not in the middle class interest, but they're only able to pass these insane conspiratorial things, often for billionaires, because of the way that these districts, I feel, are gerrymandered. Because if you presented these ideas in a more proportional system as prescribed here, I just don't think they would be very popular. I think Democratic ideas, like Mamdani's, by the way, and other, Bernie Sanders and AOC's, would be far more popular. And that's why they don't want and have always needed to minimize democracy and people's vote, because most people don't agree with them. That's what I'm trying to say. They're not popular, their ideas, unless they make it very hard for you to vote.
I don't disagree with a lot that you said there, but I think that big change can happen. Big change can happen quickly and dramatically in a moment of crisis. Sometimes windows open when we least expect them. I don't think anybody imagined, for example, that same-sex marriage would happen so quickly in this country as it did, back in the last decade. So sometimes windows open when we least expect them, and perhaps a maximally gerrymandered map that is gerrymandered nationwide wakes everybody up to the need for big change. Now, this has to start with voters wanting it, and voters demanding it. And I think that as we hit this point in which, California is going to be a 48-4 Democratic map, where, Indiana right now is talking about a 9-0 Republican map, just wiping the other side off the board. We can't keep wiping the other side off the board. We have to find a way to talk to one another and live together. And, so how are we going to do this? Maybe after we have wiped the other side completely off the board, everywhere that they can be wiped off the board, we can sit down and start to have a conversation about, okay, now what are we going to do next? We will have fought fire with fire, every place we can fight fire with fire. And then maybe we can realize it's going to take a little bit of water to do this as well. And what is that going to look like? The current kind of Republicans, no, I don't think they could get elected under a system like this. Well, that's not true. I think they'd be able to get elected, but I think they'd get elected in proportion to their number.
Right.
They are a piece of the Republican Party. They are not all of the Republican Party. And right now they are overrepresented because of gerrymandered single-member districts. But if you could have more Republicans from California, if you could have more Republicans from Massachusetts, from Connecticut, doesn't that begin the process of pulling the party back towards a more sensible place? At some point that has to happen, one would hope, one would think. I know we've been saying this for a long time, but if it's going to happen, it's going to take different electoral structures and incentives.
Let's also, though, talk about the Supreme Court, which you often reference in this article and throughout your work, because they are the reason also how we got here. You talked about the Republican leadership, what is it, organization that started these grassroots efforts.
State Leadership Committee, yes, the RSLC.
To get Republicans elected at the state level, which allows them control over all of this. But at the same time, Leonard Leo, you talk about as much as anybody, have done great reporting on him in the Federalist Society. They helped pack the Supreme Court with their guys. John Roberts, historically antithetical to voting rights. We've talked a lot about that. Guts Section 5 Voting Rights Act. Now Section 2 is up to be gutted. Likely, it looks, based on the arguments, that that's exactly what they'll decide. And he also basically, you talk about how he played the long game and at times tried to save face and look like an institutionalist, like maintaining these black districts and voting against that in Alabama, I think it was. But basically, when his whole idea is, well, just send it back to Congress, and it's up to the legislative branch to do this. But he does this knowing that they're not going to make these decisions, and so he's playing the long game. Talk a little bit about the Supreme Court's role in this, specifically John Roberts, as we look towards. I think also, isn't there a big argument next week?
Republicans have played a brilliant long game, and all of these pieces work together, and they are knotted. And the more you pull on them, the tighter the knots get. The combination of gerrymandered districts and a Supreme Court that has been itself set up for long-term Republican gains is one that has really worked hand in hand. So when, for example, you have gerrymandered state legislatures across the South, and then you do what the Chief Justice did in the Shelby County case in 2013, and you end preclearance and you allow those states to do whatever they want when it comes to voting rules, you are handing that power back to a whiter, more conservative, more rural, more deeply right-wing group of lawmakers who are more than happy to roll back the clock and use these old school voter suppression methods and stuff the old poisons back into new bottles. And John Roberts gave them that authority. When in 2019, just as voters nationwide were waking up to the importance of redistricting reform and were winning that reform all over the country, John Roberts in the Common Cause versus Rucho case says, well, you can't use the federal courts anymore. This decision arrived at a time in which federal judges appointed by presidents of both parties looked at gerrymanders drawn by both parties, by Democrats in Maryland, by Republicans in North Carolina, Ohio, Wisconsin, Michigan, and said, we are the only thing that can stop this, because when lawmakers are entrenched, they have no reason to stop this. And John Roberts said, no, let people figure it out through the political process, knowing full well that the political process could not fix this problem, that Congress could not fix this problem. And so here we are. As soon as John Roberts did that, all of these gerrymandered legislatures knew that no one would stop them if they went ahead in 2021 and drew wild maps, and that there's no one to stop them now in 2025 when they go ahead and do these unprecedented mid-decade redraws. So this court owns and ought to be ashamed of how it has turned its back on the American people, on what it has done for voters. If they had that shame, if this was not actually the very reason that they were put in these places to begin with. This is the goal of it all, is turning the Supreme Court into a right-wing super legislature. And that has been achieved, right? And that's, one reason why we have to be really, really concerned, even as we look at this crack up of the MAGA coalition, even as we look ahead to what's coming down the line in 2028, as they begin to fight each other for control once Trump leaves the stage. This court is still going to be here. This court's going to be here for some time. And they are the true fount of Republican political power.
Do you know the journalist, writer, labor journalist, author named Stephen Greenhouse?
I do.
He has a piece in The Guardian that I read today that's titled, John Roberts has badly weakened our democracy. Will he ever stand up to Trump? And he does a good job laying out all the transgressions, which you've done throughout your career and Roberts' tenure. But his piece hinges on basically, it's not too late for Roberts to
oh God,
his reputation.
Not another person making this argument that like John Roberts might save us. I mean, how many times do we have to watch John Roberts not save us before? And I have great admiration for Mr. Greenhouse and his labor writing at the Times. But I'm over this idea that John Roberts is going to ride to our rescue. John Roberts has been acting for 40 years like he is some sort of moderate, reasonable institutionalist. And really smart people, especially in the media, continue to believe this BS myth that that is what he is. He has shown us what he is in his decisions time and again and again. If John Roberts had any concerns about what he had done in Shelby County, he's had 12 years now in different cases to try and address them and roll it back. John Roberts isn't concerned about it. This is John Roberts' life's work. John Roberts got onto the court saying he was going to be calling balls and strikes. He calls balls and strikes based on which team is at the plate. John Roberts is not the Chief Justice of the United States. John Roberts is the most effective Republican politician and political operative of his generation and almost any other generation. When you look at how far he has moved this court and the Constitution on big, crucial issues on which the country is not on his side. And I'm talking about the regulatory state. I'm talking about whether or not a president is king. I'm talking about voting rights. We're talking about the environment, guns, time and abortion.
Yep.
Time and again, John Roberts has shown us who he is. He is not going to save us.
Sir, the question was, would you like super salad? I don't know what that John Roberts.
This is a Wendy's. And
Oh,
I am
oh,
ranting about John Roberts. This is why I don't get invited to many parties,
I
Pete.
love it. I literally think that's going to be a clip that I'm going to put out because you're exactly right. But just to finish, what Greenhouse's only argument was not anything about democracy or voting, which I don't think he or anybody thinks anything's going to change that. Specifically, he's talking about would he uh, rule with other conservatives on the court that the administration and our commander in thief violated the law in imposing emergency tariffs. So the tariff case, that's how he's saying, Roberts, it's not too late because that's such a big deal, that case. But I don't think
I mean, the tariff case, who knows, right? Because that's one of those cases where it's Trump up against big business. So John Roberts has to decide who's really my daddy, the Chamber of Commerce or Big Don. And
yeah,
so I could see how on that case, perhaps maybe he'll just choose rich daddy instead of authoritarian daddy.
I think the only reason I think that people are saying that is because of what we talked about earlier with the crack up of the party. Maybe John Roberts doesn't want to stay on the side of rich daddy / pedophile. Like they might want to save their own legacy by not standing up for this guy who's, maybe littered throughout the Epstein files, doing horrific thing, which could lead to a lot more Republicans doing something similar to Rich Daddy and going back to their more, conservative principles and not necessarily authoritarian leaders' whims in the middle of the night.
John Roberts has shown us who he is for the last 20 years. John Roberts is a Republican in robes. These guys ought to be like NASCAR. They ought to have actually have their votes and the people who pay for their vacations on patches on their robes. We got to stop talking about them as justices and start talking about them as what they really are. Politicians appointed for life, to positions in which their decisions are non-reviewable. They have no ethics code. We need big time Supreme Court reform. And we have to give up this idea that John Roberts and any of these justices are riding to the rescue of democracy. We are only going to save ourselves. They are not going to do this for us.
Well said. And I fully agree. There's no reason to think otherwise.
You've got me fired up. It's like I've had some of this Trump vodka or something.
Nah, man, I'm always glad you're fired up in this way because I just think if everybody has read your books and articles, the reason why I always keep coming back to you, you're kind of the journalist on this. And not only do you understand all the nooks and crannies in the history of much of it, all of it, but your passion about the injustice and the way that you explain it, I always love it. So I'm here for it. But speaking of which, what is the state of play here at the end, where we're at? Because I do believe next week they're going to take a look at, Supreme Court's going to take a look at the Texas redistricting case, probably going to side with Texas, I think you said in that article. But
gosh golly, yeah.
And you really do a great job, and it's a better read than I suppose talked about, laying out the lay of the land, how each state has gotten to where they've gotten to. But where does this leave us? How much is up in the air between now and November 26?
It's still the second inning of the game, so it's really difficult to look at the scoreboard.
Great. Okay.
The scoreboard is going to keep changing, and it's going to keep changing as the courts weigh in and as additional states weigh in. But Republicans have more possibility and more opportunity. So at this particular moment, California's map that gives the Democrats 5 seats is still live, and the Republican map has been paused by a lower federal court and will be reviewed by the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, I don't know what the U.S. Supreme Court will do, but I can look at what the U.S. Supreme Court has done in every other voting rights case for the last 15 years, in which the thumb has been on the scale for the Republican Party. And I can be extraordinarily doubtful that they won't find a way to say, yes, this is a map that's about partisanship and not a map about race. So I fully expect that California and Texas will counteract each other. So then the question becomes what happens from there. Democrats are going to gain a seat in Utah off of the new map that's in place. Republicans have already taken a seat in Missouri, a seat in North Carolina. They're at work as we speak on a map in Indiana that will take an additional 2 seats. There's a new map in Ohio that adds probably 2 seats. So that gets you to 6. Florida, likely to go next. Ron DeSantis says he can get anywhere from 3 to 5 off of that map. I think 3 is high, but probably as much as he could get. So I think you could that could get you to 8 or 9. New Hampshire could still go. Kansas was about to go. Press the pause button. We'll see what they really do in January. And Kentucky could still go. So that's in the ballpark of 10 to 11 seats that Republicans could pick up via partisan gerrymandering. I don't see a lot of additional options for Democrats. Virginia's been talking tough. I don't think they can get it past voters. There's a lawsuit in New York. I don't think that's going to go anywhere. It's a real Hail Mary. But then there's the second piece of this. And I'm sorry I'm talking too long.
No,
but the second piece of this goes back to John Roberts and the U.S. Supreme Court. And there is a case about racial gerrymandering that the court heard last month, and I expect the decision to come down some point in January. This is the Calais case out of Louisiana, and it has to do with the question of whether or not it's constitutional to draw majority-minority opportunity districts that protect the rights of Black and Latino communities to have representation. If the court finds essentially that the rest of Section 2 is not constitutional, it could open up the potential that Georgia, South Carolina, Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama, Tennessee could all next year draw new maps that wipe seats currently held by Black Democrats off the map. Stacey Abrams' group Fair Fight says this is as many as 12 to 19 seats. The Democrats don't have any answer for that. So the state of play is, we are in this moment in which the most recent poll of the generic congressional ballot that asks people, would you vote for a Democrat or Republican next year? A Democrat suddenly have what's close to a double-digit lead, which is dramatic. It's stunning. It's the kind of lead that ordinarily one would point to, and that's the potential of a big wave. But if they have to counteract a dozen seats gained through partisan gerrymandering and a dozen seats gained through racial gerrymandering, in addition to the 3 they have to take anyway that they're behind by now, it's a very difficult road given how few competitive districts are left in the country. Not saying it's impossible, but that number is very, very difficult.
Well, really important to stay on top of your reporting. Nobody covers it better. So keep reading and following David. Where are you mostly posting daily? On Threads, Blue Sky?
Yeah, I'm over on Blue Sky most of the time. I'm Dave Daley over there. You can find me over there. And this new piece in the New Republic is exciting. And Anti-Democratic is now out in paperback wherever it is you buy your books, ideally at a local bookstore or from bookshop.org, and not from that big behemoth. But it's everywhere.
I think that your 3 books, Unrigged, Rat Fucked, and Anti-Democratic, should be on the bookcase of anybody who cares about America and democracy. Like, they tell the story as well as anybody has told it. And it's so important. This new piece is very comprehensive. Everybody should go read it and then share it. Share it everywhere so that it gets a lot of attention and clicks. And we'll talk to David at least every month and anytime there are new developments on this. And stay in the fight. Be involved. There are solutions. The end of your article lays them out. And they're not your ideas specifically. They're, Jamie Raskin proposing these ideas in the Congress. So really potentially huge possibilities, not tomorrow, as you say, but with after the next census, especially. And that matters because we should play the fucking long game and not live in a world of instant gratification all the time, especially when it comes to democracy, especially when it comes like you can't just punch out and be cynical and not be involved, because then, what are you doing? What is your purpose? The apathy can't be the answer. Cynicism can't be the answer, which is why there is light at the end of the tunnel. I always believe that. I know you do too. I'll shut up. Thank you.
Very grateful for you, Pete. Thanks again for the time that you always give me and all of these issues that seem so wonky, but
you're the best.
They are important. I really appreciate you. Thank you.
Yep. All right. Thank you, everybody, for watching live. Sorry about the technical issues. You will not hear them if you listen to the podcast. It will be smooth. Just me and David. No nothing, but just a beautiful conversation. Big, beautiful. Thank you, David. Bye, everybody.